All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Davidson Hang. I'm so excited to introduce you, my accomplishment coach, Alex Terranova. Would love to share with you. I'm gonna be curious and just ask him a little bit more about his book that he just released. Love the book. I actually shared it with some of my friends here at LinkedIn. So yeah, fictional authenticity. Woo! I see that
Thanks,
you're
man.
traveling the world doing your book signing. So, yeah.
I don't know if I'm traveling the world doing my book signing, but yeah, I did. I signed the first batch of books actually for a lot of my mentors and leaders and coaches, people that trained you and me. It was pretty cool. I got to sit at my publisher's office and like have a bunch of books like stacked up on the desk and just like go through them. You know,
Wow.
it's
Hmm.
funny. It's like when you're writing to people, you got to write like a little note, right? So it's like not a quick. It's
Hmm.
like, who is this person for
Hmm.
me? What can I say to them? It was fun. It was like
Uh,
really to get to acknowledge a whole bunch of people that I think I wouldn't be here without them.
I think the coolest thing is seeing your book on Amazon. Like, I feel like that's like how you know you've made it. Like, when you know, that was like the coolest thing for me. I'm like, yo, he's on Amazon. Oh, he can retire now.
Dude, I wish that is not how it goes. But you know what? The coolest thing has been like people buying the book and then sending me pictures of them like holding the book, or like the picture of like their kid with the book, or like their dog with the
Hmm.
book, like whatever. You know what I mean? Like I even last night, one of my good friends loaned his copy to a friend of his, and he texted her, "Hey, how's the book?" And she was like, "I'm obsessed with this author. This is amazing." And he sent me that
Wow.
text back. He
What?
afforded me, and I was like, oh, "This is,
That's
dude,
so
this is
cool.
not. It's just beyond what I thought, right? Like I'm an unknown author. This is like so beyond what I would have expected."
Yeah, I think my favorite part of the books is when you were just being like really, really authentic, and you were just like sharing vulnerably about like your past and your stories. And like for me, like all the stories was interesting because like even though you were my coach, like I feel like I didn't know any of this stuff. So for me, it was just like when people like just share like from within, like for me, that's always like the biggest takeaway because it's so relatable, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and there's some of that stuff was like really. Here, I'll give you like a really interesting example. My mom calls me after she read like the last
Mm,
version of the draft of the published draft, like the last draft, and she asked me a question. She's like, "Hey, do you remember that the story that I talk about where I learned how to write and my dad kind of like kicked my butt?" Is a nice way of putting it.
mm,
And my mom's like,
mm,
"That's how you remember it?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "That's
mm,
so interesting because it's not how I remember it." And
mm,
what we got to talking about isn't that my version isn't true or her version isn't true. It's actually that memory is not reliable. None of our
mm,
memory is reliable. Like there's so many studies on how unreliable memory is and how so much of it is on
mm,
the made up stories, and then our memory matches the stories. And
mm,
but it's the impact that it has, right? Like I wrote about the way it feels to me and the way the emotional impact it has. And
mm.
I think like being sensitive to the people I was writing about, because like I do
Hmm.
love my dad. My dad's a great dad. It's not like he's a bad guy or I want to make him look bad,
Hmm.
but it's what happened and it's how I felt about it. And so it was hard to write about, and also to like be authentic, to tell the truth, and also to respect people, and not feel like I was like doing somebody wrong who I didn't want to do wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting. They also reminded me of like my dad and what happened, and it's interesting because anytime a relative is like, "Oh, your dad loved you so much," like your dad showered you with so much love, right? And it's like that's not how I remember my dad. It's like completely the opposite, and there was just so much resentment and so much like hatred, like for I would say the majority of my life, right? Until AC and Landmark, and then now I'm like, oh, like like I can see where my family's coming from, because from their point of view, like he would like buy me all these gifts, and he would like always hold me, you know, and like I was like I was always on his back, like piggyback rides and stuff like that. But I don't remember any of this stuff.
Yeah, you know what's true is like I remember all the great things. Like I do remember with my relationship with my dad is, you know, my dad was always my baseball coach. He was always like
Mm-hmm.
supportive, and especially around sports and those kind of things. And it's funny, I remember my dad being like the hardest worker ever. Like he was always working on a
Mm-hmm.
project, always working on something. And that's my memory of my dad. It's funny, I shared that with him recently, and he like lit up, because like my dad is like 80 now, and he's not very healthy, so he's like in a chair a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He's not active very much. And I think that over the last like 20 years, he's gone from being so active to so inactive, that
Mm-hmm.
I think it like lit him up to hear that my memory of him is of this like active, hardworking man. And the one of the legacies that he left me is a legacy of hard work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like I feel like we often don't think as highly of ourselves as how others like view us. Like anytime you mention like anyone in the concept coaching, I can give you a laundry list of like how awesome they are, you know. But sometimes like they like each person might be like, well, I don't know if like if that's how others like view me, right? It's just so interesting.
Dude, totally. I mean, look, even with this, like, so, you know, even with like the book being out now, you know, I have so many amazing people around me who helped me with it, friends who didn't but are supportive, and people like showering me with acknowledgments like, you wrote a book. And I'm like, yeah, but it hasn't sold 10,000 copies yet, right? Because when the publisher said, how many copies are we going to sell, I said, I want to sell 10,000. And he kind of laughed at me, because he's like unknown author, you know, who's not famous, sell 10,000 copies. That's a big deal. So that there's a few different numbers, but some numbers say the average unknown author sells 10 copies. Some studies say the average unknown author sells like 250 copies. Like I'm doing great comparatively speaking, and I'm
Yeah.
nowhere near 10,000. And so for me, I'm like, I suck. Like I must be a bad writer. Like I'm not doing it good. And other people are like, dude, you wrote a book. Like lots of people say they're going to write books, and how many people actually do?
Yeah, honestly, you writing this book, I actually started writing, like I've written like 100 pages already, just literally because like you just started writing a book. So it literally motivated me, where I was like thinking about it for like a couple years, like at least 2 years, right? And I would write like 1 page and then like 2 pages. And, you know, I think I got to 30 pages, and then like I just stopped, right? And then like literally like the day I finished reading your book, I like woke up at 5 a.m. and just started busting out papers and like pages, and I was like, yo. So yeah, man, like you made it possible for all of us. Like, you know, it's like, it's pretty inspiring.
Thanks, man. That's awesome. I do think, you know, if I had to give a shout out to the person who did that for me, I would say it's got to be Seth Godin, because a lot of my fears were this book started 4.5 years ago. And it wasn't, for me, writing wasn't the problem. I could sit down and churn out 10,000 words in a day. The problem was I would stop in between those big days of writing, because I'd get in my head, I'd get afraid of like, who am I to write a book? Who cares about reading my book? And Seth Godin has a few podcasts about like, everyone should have a podcast. Everyone should have a book. Everyone should have and it doesn't have to be a podcast or a book, but like everyone should be out there telling their story, because everyone has value to add. And it doesn't mean that everyone's going to make money on it, but money is not in value or not the same. And I think hearing him say everyone should do it had me be like, wait a minute, I for sure should then, because like I like love to write, and it's not hard for me to create content.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I feel like Seth Godin's like one of those guys that's like everyone should like follow, right? Like I feel like he's like what a lot of people that are into this, like, yeah, like you got to follow Seth Godin. Like he's like one of the key guys. I would love to kind of actually pick your brain. Oh, congrats on the 100th episode of your podcast as well. That's pretty
Thank
awesome,
you.
man.
Thanks, man.
Would love to pick your brain on like what were some of like the biggest takeaways from getting to number 100, right? I'm sure like every milestone you're kind of like, you're like, okay, like would love to hear like what your thoughts are after reaching that milestone.
Yeah. So the biggest one is commitment, is like commitment and I would say consistency goes into that, but it's really commitment because, you know, I remember when I said I wanted to start a podcast, I remember saying to myself, you got to pick a number that's going to be like a big challenge, like a big commitment. And you don't get to quit until you get to that number. Now, if you get to that number and you don't want a podcast, you don't like it, it doesn't work for you, then go ahead and stop. Like you fulfilled on your commitment. But don't make up your mind before that. Because I knew, and I don't mean this as like a rule for everyone, you know, but if you're like someone like me, I start and stop things based on how good I am at them or how much success I get. So success for me is typically measured in money. So the typical thing for me would have been like, do 20 episodes. Oh, I'm not making any money. This is hard. I'll quit. Same thing. We could say that about books or anything else. And that was like the pattern in my life. So the podcast was an exercise to say, I'm going to go all in on this right from the start. I'm going to do this as if it's a part of my job, right? You don't wake up and you work at LinkedIn. You don't wake up and say, I don't feel like going to work today. I'm not going to go. Like you go, it's your job. So I put like dates in my calendar that I would record. I would like book guests and commit. I had contracts created. Like I did all these things. And even when I knew that I would like be going out of town, I would record stuff in advance so I could like be putting stuff out. And my commitment also was at least like one episode a week. And I could do more than that, but I had to do at least one. And you know, that's the biggest thing is that I proved to myself that I can say that I'm going to do something over a long span of time and show up day in and day out. And what made it possible though was all the structures, right? So like setting the calendar dates, booking dates with people, telling everyone I have a podcast and telling everyone I got to get to 100 episodes, right? And then I would promote it like, I mean, you see it on social media. I'm always promoting it because then it's like, it's public accountability, right?
Yeah.
That is by far the biggest takeaway in like the thing. And that's just for me personally, right? That doesn't even impact whoever I impacted with these episodes.
That's a good point. I feel like it impacts the person that you're interviewing just as much as it impacts you, if not more sometimes. Right?
Yeah, I do. I made some cool friends too, like because of this. Like I have some new friends because of the podcast world, that people that I met, like I'd go to like an event and I'd see the speaker and I was like, man, that guy was great. I should have him on my podcast. And like now we text or we talk on the phone, or if I go to the city that they live in, we were for sure meet up. And so now it became this thing that actually brought me close to people that I might not have been close with. And if I can help them or they can help me, I think we would. You know, it's like a lot of the people, if you look at the book, like the people who like have quotes on the back and there's like quotes in the front of the book, people that talked about, a lot of those people I met through the podcast.
Wow. It's you know, it's funny. Actually, I got this job at LinkedIn because I interviewed him for my podcast. So I didn't have a relationship with him prior. I just reached out to him and was like, hey, I would love to interview you. And we kept in touch, and now he referred me into LinkedIn. So that's the power of, like you said, the relationship you build while you're interviewing someone is so much more authentic and so much more deep, because you go really deep, right? So they feel really heard and they feel like connected, and it's like you're really present. So I think that's what, you know, made the difference for me.
Yeah. And you didn't do it for that intention, right? You weren't like, I'm going to interview a guy from LinkedIn so I can get a job there.
No, it's just to share his knowledge and to share his wisdom with the world, essentially.
I think do you remember, I said this to somebody this morning, I don't know how old you are. I think you're a little younger than me, but do you remember the movie Field of Dreams?
Yeah.
I've just had this in my head a lot lately. Like when they're like, if you build it, he will come. And I feel like that's actually a lesson that almost all of us could take away and apply to life. Like if you build it, whatever he is, right? Because we're not all waiting for our dad, but like in the movie, but maybe it's like money. If you build it, the money will come. If you build it, the fame will come. If you build it, the recognition will come. If you build it, your voice will come. If you build, like, whatever it is, but you actually have to be committed to building it first.
Yeah, and like you said, so I think commitment is a huge thing. Like you said, you like committed to it, like you had structures. Like, was there any point, like maybe episode 70 or 65 or whatever, where you were like, well, I don't know, man, like I don't know if I want to do this anymore, and you're just like, well, actually, like I'm committed, or like I'm sure you had moments where you're like,
Dude,
like this sucks.
There were a lot. There were, most of the time, the things that sucked were like the editing and the getting things ready for social media to promote. The editing process before I got into like I'm talking to you in the studio, in the recording studio now. But before I had this I think I started recording here like around episode 60 or 70 or something. So most of the way, I think I did it, on my own.
Wow.
And even still, sometimes I have to do a lot of work on an episode. It's not like I just farm all out now. I still am hands-on in every single episode, like from A to Z. And there's still Sundays, like where I'm like in front of my computer on a Sunday, getting the newest episode, the show notes ready, or the wave file ready to promote it. And like, I'm not always psyched to do that part. Like, I think I'm trying to do it now in batches. So I do like 3 or 4 episodes at a time, like once a month, do 3 or 4 episodes, and I don't have to do it all weekly, but that's like 4 hours on a Sunday, like I'm not psyched about doing it. But here's actually a great way to look at it. It happened with the book too. When I was like getting the book ready, there's all sorts of like editing and all these things that you have to do. And it's not fun. And the thing that the breakthrough that I had is, it's not about the editing. It's not about the all the stuff. It's about the final product. So when I'm doing this work on a Sunday, or when I'm working on the book to try to get it so it can be done, I'm reminding myself, this is about the thing. This is about the bigger vision, not about the minutia that you're working in.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I mean, easier said than done, right? Like, I know it's like think about the big picture. But it also sounds like you have accountability coaches as well, right? Like, do you have your own coach that helps you, in addition to publicly announcing it and all that, but you actually have your own coach that helps you stay accountable, right, to your podcast goals?
Yeah. I've had a coach now for like 4 or 5 years. 2 coaches over that time. One actually I started the book with, and one I completed it with. I can say I will never not have a coach. And it's not because I need it. I'm doing excellent. It's because why wouldn't I want to be the best version of myself? Not somebody else, right? Not better, not like a comparison to me, but like, I think about it like this. If you're running a 5-minute mile, but you could run a 4-minute mile, and you wanted to run a 4-minute mile, not because someone else thinks you should, but you want to, how cool would that be? And that's kind of my thing, is that's why I always have a coach. So yeah, I have a coach, but then to your point, I have phone calls and appointments in my calendar every day of other colleagues and friends and people that I care about. We support each other in different ways. So I might be supporting someone around their business. They might be supporting me around like spirituality. I might be supporting someone around writing. They might be supporting me around writing. But I definitely don't leave it like all on my shoulders. Like that's how I used to do things. And that was a for sure way to not do stuff.
Yeah. And I'm curious as to, because it sounds like you got support like with like editing the book and stuff like that too. Like, was that hard for you to like kind of let go and just like accept help, or like what was that like in terms of just like having so many people like just dive deep into like your life? Like, was it harder to like ask for support, or were people pretty willing to like support you?
A couple of things. Like, I've gotten really good at getting support from people. Like, that's just a practice for over the last like for 5 years that I've been cultivating, and I give people a lot of support. So it's not like I'm taking and not, it's, I'm supporting a lot of people, and it has it that a lot of people support me. So when you ask about the editing part, that's actually a really personal, like vulnerable part, in the sense of, you know, I spent my life as a person who was a really bad writer and could barely read in a lot of ways because of like learning disabilities. And when I used to turn in papers in high school and college, I always joked that it looked like teachers would like slit their wrists and just like bleed out a red ink all over my pages. And dude, this is after like my mom or friends would edit them too. It's like I would write them, I'd get them edited, and they'd still get destroyed. And every time, and my memory and my story about this is that I'm stupid, is that was evidence that I'm stupid. And when I had to have a breakthrough in the editing process of, editors are not here to tell me that I'm stupid. They're actually here to support me in my vision. And my vision is creativity. My vision is voice. My vision is metaphor and analogy. Like, these are my strengths. My strength is not grammar and syntax and those things. And that's actually okay. And I think that was the breakthrough of going, hey, if the editor was good at all the things that I'm good at, they wouldn't be an editor. They'd be a writer, and vice versa. I'm never going to be an editor, and it's okay. I don't want to be. So embracing what I'm good at and then getting supported around the things I'm not. And Christina Stathopoulos, who is the editor of this book, who helped me like make this thing to completion. You know, she said something at the early stages is, I feel like the reason she took this on is, she goes, this thing is gold. And I feel like my job is to come up and like dust the dirt off the gold so you can see all the gold.
Wow. That's a great analogy. Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. I was always, I did not do well in English class, let's just say that. And I think like the story I used to tell myself was like, I'm not a good writer. But actually, you releasing like the podcast and you releasing this, actually, I don't know if you noticed, because you probably have so many things going on, but I've been releasing a lot more blog posts and a lot more content on that. So I've been pretty regular with my website, because, you know, you're making it possible, right? Because like you have shared with me in the past, like, hey, like I'm not the best writer, or I'm not the best editor. And I'm also like, I think literally every single one of my blog posts, at least one person has like, hey, grammatical error. But that's because they love me. Yeah. And I'm always like, I'm such a failure at life. And then like every time someone does that, I'm less likely to release like my next post, right? So it's just funny like how it works.
Dude, it's so funny how like the littlest things set off those old stories inside of us. And I'm the same. I write like a Facebook post, and it'll be like, I think, a powerful post that has a powerful message, and somebody will be like, hey, you spelled scary wrong. And it's like, really, that's what you got from it? And I have to remember that they might have actually been trying to support me, but my listening only hears what's wrong, and it's like a criticism. And I have to remember, like, hey, thank God they told me. It's like somebody telling you that you have kale in your teeth. Like, it's better they tell you than you walk around all day with kale in your teeth.
That's good yeah, I like that, because I hate it when people don't tell me whenever I have like kale in my teeth, or spinach, right? I'm always like, what the fuck, dude? I went through this whole day, and it's like the end of the day, and no one fucking told me. Like, come on now. But yeah, that's a good one. I like that. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to share with us. I think there was a lot of takeaways in terms of just like learning about how to like start your own podcast, staying committed to what you say you're going to do, getting help from others, like public accountability and asking for support, and just like choosing like your commitment, even though like you don't feel like it. I feel like those are some really big takeaways. So I appreciate you sharing with you, and I definitely want to have you back on, because like I feel like we have so many good conversations, and the next time I would love to talk about like vulnerability and like just putting yourself out there and like not being afraid to just own your truth.
Yeah, dude, I'd be happy to. I mean, obviously my book is called Fictional Authenticity, and so I'm all about authenticity. And I think that you can't be authentic unless you're willing to be vulnerable. Because, right, if you're not willing to be vulnerable, how can you show the world your authentic self? And it doesn't, vulnerability looks different for everybody, right? What's vulnerable for me is not what's vulnerable for you. But yeah, I would love to. And thanks, man. Thanks for sharing the book. Thanks for being such a big supporter. Thanks for reading it. Somebody said to me recently, I want to read your book without blinking. Like they were like making fun of how bad they want to read it, right? And like you read it like fast, like you didn't even blink. But thanks, man.
Like literally in a day and a half, I finished it.
And it's not like it's not even a short book. It's like 200.
I know.
It's 275 pages. I'm like looking to see how many pages. But yeah, get the book.
It was really good.
Get the book, please. I think I want to ask you, like, what's something you got? What's the biggest thing you got from the book that you would be like, why someone else should read it?
Honestly, like, it just made me like, for me, like, it made me like be okay with like just how messed up I am, right? Like, I'm like, dude, like, I'm not alone. Like, not in a bad way, but like, dude, like we all have like our own, like what we think is like horrible. And it just made me like accept myself a lot more. But actually like it made me like laugh and kind of like I was there with you, like kind of like going on a journey of like, you know, like this is like your life. And like, it was like, you know, kind of like the hero's journey. Like I felt like I was like kind of like on a journey and I was like, whoa, like the story of it for me was like my biggest takeaway, where it was like, wow, like, yeah, you've gone through a lot, you know, so it was cool just like kind of coming on the ride with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think the thing is, it's like we all have, right? Like, you know, there's plenty of people that have gone through way worse and more messed up things than we have. But to our childlike mind, it's intense for all of us. Like, you know, it doesn't matter if really bad shit happened to you as a kid or like things that we don't think as adults are so bad. But that kid-like brain thinks that those other things are really bad too. So,
yeah.
Thanks,
Thanks, Alex. We'll talk soon. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Davidson.